Okay, good afternoon. So the question is, how can one improve their memory, or what are some techniques to improve the mind's memory? Dr. Peterman, what do you think about that?
A lot of ways to do that. A number of things. I want to give an introduction to this concept because I'm probably one of the people that would be able to speak to this as good as anybody else. One of the things we will want to do is figure out how to improve the memory and particularly improve the ability to recall. I will tell you this. I made some notes, so I want to make sure that I get it right. Using the tips that I am going to present to you and Dave is going to ask me about, is I went through 4 different after high school levels of education, colleges, universities, various kinds of electronic schools, and finally at the age of 68 graduating with a doctorate in naturopathic medicine. I hold 17 patents worldwide in wireless communication and artificial intelligence as well. And I spent the last 16 years studying very comprehensively the situation of aging. So I feel like I have some perspective on the use of the mind and the use of memory, because without proper good control of the memory, those things would have been out of my reach. Now I will tell you that there are also within the reach of most people. They just have been convinced that that's not true. You have an incredible power in your brain. You have incredible life potential with your mind. What we want to do is, with memory and the discussion of unlocking the power of memory, we want to be able, Dave and I, to discuss methods to challenge your life and make it better. Our discussion is Challenge Life Better on challengelifebetter.com. If you don't forget things, you tend to be able to get more accomplished. And those things can be your dreams, they can be your goals. And that is what we're going to try to cover in a series of investigations into memory. So let's get started with this. And again, your question more specifically is exactly what? What do you want to know?
So how can an individual improve their ability to recall information?
Okay, one of the things that, I'll give you an example. People say, well, never forget it. You know, I never forget a face, but I can't remember names. And by the end of a conversation with a new person, they can't remember their name. It's Bob or Joe or Bill or something like that. But I want to say goodbye, and I'm stepping on my tongue because I can't remember that person's name. I don't know anybody on this planet, doesn't matter what culture you're from, that hasn't occurred to. It occurs to everybody. Yet the one thing that most people want to hear more than anything else from other people is their name. Because if you say somebody's name, if I'm greeting Dave, and at the end of the first time I've met him, I said, well, Dave, it's nice to meet you. He's going to have a little more respect for me, maybe not consciously, but he's going to say, oh, that might be a nice person. He may not even know why he feels that way. But he knows there was something about that conversation they had. Maybe it wasn't. Maybe he didn't realize that, gosh, I remembered his name. So how do you do that? There's a whole bunch of ways to remember people's names. You can associate the letter D with something. You can look at Dave and say, well, he has glasses, or he wears a baseball cap, or he has this neat tattoo on the left arm, which reminds you of maybe David in the Bible who fought Goliath, because he had to have a really nice thing to remember it. It's a silly image, but next time I see him, I see this guy in my mind with a slingshot taking on David. And pretty well, if you know Dave, that's what he does anyway. He takes on challenges, and it's amazing. So I've tagged a little something there. There's a lot of ways that you can do that. You can use mnemonics. You can say the name is a D, and his last name starts with F. So you can use something like, well, I don't really know what to say, but anyway, I was just thinking of duck feathers. You know, it's easy to remember. Now, there's nothing about a duck or feathers, but duck feathers makes me realize, oh, that's Dave. You know,
you can use a story to tell about the name in your mind.
Attach a story to whoever it is you see, and do it very quickly so that you can actually listen to what it is that they're talking about when they're telling you something. Now, also, I'll just throw you a little bone right now. We're going to talk later about how did I survive those 4 different schools of higher learning and taking notes. Well, I give that to Miss Jones. Selma Jones, 1965, in a history class in high school, taught me how to take notes. My dad was very upset that I went through a lot of legal tablets, the yellow tablets, and he saw me writing one day and he said, well, you left out half of everything on the page. And I said, that's right, I did. I'm taking notes. He said, well, what kind of notes are you taking if half of it's missing on the page? I said, let me show you. And I said, she was talking about something about it in history. And so instead of trying to write every word that this woman was saying, she taught us that you write a general idea of what was discussed in 3 or 4 sentences. You write that down. You skip 2 or 3 lines. I would skip 3 lines. And then something else she was talking about, and I put that down. And by the end of the class, which was over an hour, I had maybe 15 or 20 pages that were sparsely populated. Now, the scientists tell us that she did not know this as a scientific fact, but she just knew that it was something that worked. If you want to remember something long term, you want to be able to move it from the frontal cortex to the rest of the mind. And we're not sure where memory is stored in the brain. We just don't know, because there are people that have part of their brain missing. I have a friend who has 1/3 of her brain gone due to a car accident, but within 15 years, she got virtually everything that she ever knew came back, including her personality. This person shouldn't even be alive, but she's back, and she's as funny as she ever was. She's one-eyed, can't hear out of one ear, has no sense of smell or taste, but she's alive and has enjoyed life for the last 48 years. A miracle. But it's an illustration that we don't know where the memory is stored, but we do know where it's stored for short-term memory, right up front in our logic. So the goal for long-term memory is to move it to long-term memory. So what's this thing about skipping over a few pages? If you take those notes within 6 hours, sit down and remember what was said in that particular first discussion, that little paragraph, that little bit of sentence snippet that you wrote, you could virtually recall everything that was said, because you have a key that would tell you how to do that. That key accesses the front cortex of the brain, hadn't been erased yet, and then you fill in what you really need to remember. Maybe it's a critical thing for a test. Go to the next one. By golly, you can remember what was said at that particular time. So you go all the way through, and by the end of the day, in the evening, I would have 15 to 18 pages of information not a theme or anything I could turn in, but it was my mental notes that have been transcribed from the frontal cortex to the rest of the brain. I did not know that until probably 10 years ago that I actually found out why it worked. I thought it was fantastic. I didn't know why it worked. I've taught literally hundreds of people about this technique, and every one of them said, by golly, this works. This is crazy. And I said, well, you know who uses that kind of information? Police detectives. They'll sit there taking notes. They're not writing everything somebody said or everything they see. They'll write notes, and they go back to the office, and then they fill in the information. So that's something that we can do to improve our memories. We'll listen when somebody's talking. Think of duck feathers. You're never going to forget it because you're thinking of duck feathers now. And you're thinking of my friend Dave who has a bill. See, it's a bill there. So it's silly, but that's one example of memory improvement. And we're going to talk about a number of other examples in a few other videos. So I'm looking forward to you joining us. And you have any other questions about some of this, how this works?
So as far as techniques, that's one of them. What's another technique that you suggest as far as remembering things for information?
One of the things we hamstring ourselves with memory is that Dave is here. He works here in the laboratory. He has a job. He's somewhere else. He has a life, okay? But I see him only here. So if I were to see him at the movies, I'm hoping I would remember who he is. But surprisingly enough, I'm going to relate a little silly anecdote that happened to me. I was walking through an airport in Denver 40 years ago. And this tall gentleman, very tall, handsome individual, sees me about 75 yards away under the rotunda there in the Denver airport, and is waving at me. And I'm looking, there's nobody behind me. And I go, me? And he goes, yeah, it's good to see you, yeah. And I could see sort of what he was saying, but I had a flight to catch, and I was wearing a wristwatch. And I looked at the wristwatch, and I said, gotta go. Bye. I had no idea who he was. And I get to the gate, my flight's canceled. It's snowing. So maybe I get another flight. It turned out that 6 hours later, I got another flight. Anyway, I came back, and here's the guy still standing over there. So, okay, I'll make a fool out of myself. I have no idea who this guy in this suit is. He must be a politician or somebody that I have bumped into. So I went over, and I was talking to him, and he said, how are you doing? I said, just missed my flight. There's been canceled by snow, blah, blah, blah. And I said, what are you doing here? Oh, I'm visiting my family. They came up to ski and now we can't get out and blah, blah, blah. And finally he just looked at me and said, you haven't got a clue who I am. I said, no. I have no idea who I'm talking to. I know you, but I can't figure it out. And he says, don't worry about it. I'm not in the right place. I said, so what's the right place? He says, white coat. And I'm asking you to say, I'm your dentist.
Oh, wow.
I just thought, oh my God, what's wrong with me? And he says, no. You need to understand that is very normal for people when they're out of place to figure out who they are.
Absolutely.
Well, fast forward to 2009, and I end up with a non-malignant brain tumor, which wipes out some of my ability to recognize faces. And I ended up being tested. I had 19% at that time. I'm now over this. But 19% certainty of who I was talking to. I met a lady, and she says, blah, 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 blah. 30 minutes we talked. Finally, she looked at me and she said, you don't know who I am. I said, here we go again. It turns out that I was in a small business with her husband. It was his wife So she says, "How you almost had me convinced. How do you deal with this?" And I said, "Well, I just wait until somebody says something that makes me realize who I'm talking to." I said, "Some people walk a different way. Some people have a bit of an accent. Some people have really funny hair or a big freckle on the side of their nose, or something is going to stand out." And after a while, when I've spoken to them, then this lack of ability to know who I'm talking to is taken away, and I'm able to figure it out. But when you lose some of your cognitive skills, it can be terrifying, absolutely terrifying.
Right.
So having recovered 99% of my abilities now through the use of natural materials, worked very hard at it, did the research, 16 years worth. I can say that there's things that we're going to talk about in another video. What is it you can take to improve that? And until next time, this is Jerry.
And David.
And we've enjoyed talking with you and look forward to, what was it we were going to talk about? Never mind.
Be well.
Be well.